Hello and welcome to another chainsaw carving video. Today I'm going to cover the things that you need, the things that you might occasionally need, things you probably don't need, and the things that are dangerous. I mean, downright don't get it. Alright, so I guess jump right in there with chainsaws. Obviously, I've said this in a couple of videos, and I'll say it again. You need a decent sized, this is a block out and finish saw. I've got it set up with 14-inch 043 bar and chain, which means you also have to change the sprocket. This is an MS-250 steel, which I would rank as one of the best starter saws out there. You might step down to like a 180 if the 250 is a little light, a little heavy for you. The 180 is a little lighter, and then eventually, I don't know, as you strengthen up, maybe switch the 180 down to your detail saw, and then get one of these for your regular carving saw. Now, everybody's different. I mean, they do it different ways. This is what works for me. The 180 tends to vibrate a little bit more. It's an okay saw. You can do some block out work with it. The cool thing is it's already set up with the right bar and chain. So, yeah, not a bad place to start, especially for under $200. You could be carving at the end of the day, you know, with that saw. Let's see. So detail saw, I really ought to rank this stuff as like 1 through 10, you know, as far as usefulness. So I mean, the MS-250, I'm going to give a straight out 10. I mean, you just have to have that to chainsaw carve. You have to have a place to start. You have to have a saw. That's a good choice. So is the Makita EA 4300F, long name, good results. Anyway, this is an MS-170. This is my detail saw. I rarely use it. It's a quarter tip 043 quarter pitch. So we're talking about the distance between the links is 1/4 inch. The distance between, you know, on the guide rail itself is 043. And then the length of the bar is a 12-inch. And this is a quarter tip because you can put a quarter on that and it just so happens to be the same size. They also have dime, sub dime, which is really small. They have nickel, and then they have toonie. Toonie's about the silver dollar sized. Now, I say quarter tip is the best because it's a good trade-off between getting pretty good detail and longevity of the bar. If you get that down to a dime tip or sub dime, they don't last very long. That's a tremendous amount of heat that's generated on the tip, trying to roll that chain around that tip. Quarter tip's not so bad. This is a bar by Canon. Canon bars are pretty decent. I would recommend them. The steel bars, sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you get a bad one. As far as the carving bars go. As far as the regular bars go, man, steel bars and chains are the way to go. I put it on everything. It doesn't matter what kind of saw. So the next thing is you need a big block out saw. So what would I give that one as far as 1 through 10? I don't know. Detail saw, I give probably a 7 for me. A lot of people really heavily rely on them, and you might see numbers in the 9s and 10s for most everybody else, but it is what it is. All right, so the next one is a MS-250. I'm sorry, 290. This is my block out saw. It's not an especially powerful saw, but I've done a couple things to open it up a little bit. I simply drilled a hole up here on the muffler to get it to run a little better. And I've had this saw for a long time. I actually bought it used. I've added some better spikes, bumper spikes on it. And what I've done is I've taken a 20-inch bar and chain. It's 3/8 pitch, and I've made I put a smaller chain on, so it's still 3/8, but it's low profile 3/8. And the saw shop will definitely look at you goofy if you say, I need a 20-inch 050 low profile chain, because they're like, why would you put that on there? Trust me, it's really decent. It cuts down grain faster than a full chisel chain or semi-chisel chain, and it doesn't get dull quite as fast, and it's a lot safer. This thing doesn't kick that bad, which is, you know, you're carving, you're doing things with the saw that you may or may not you should be. So block out saw, I'm going to give a 9. It's a pretty important saw to have. You may not use it every single day, but you know, it's almost impossible to plank, like make long cuts or really big cuts, or you know, you got to whittle this stuff down to get it into a carvable size. Sometimes you have to split the log in half, and I would say 20 inches is the minimum of what you should be running. Now, a couple things to cover. There is an MS-291. And I believe that's a pretty decent saw. For your blockout saw, throttle control is not so important. It really doesn't matter if the saw goes wide open with the faintest touch of the trigger, because it's more like cutting firewood, where you just need that saw to be peppy and giddy up and go. With the MS250, they also make the 251. I would avoid that thing like the plague. It's so soft feeling, and the throttle control is terrible. It acts like a much peppier saw. So when you just barely touch the trigger, that thing goes. And when it goes, it gives you a twist, right? Wah! Not only that, but like the anti-vibration mounts are so sloppy on that 251 that it just feels like you're cutting through mush. You have no real feel of what the tip of the bar is doing. So MS250 all the way, even though it can be hard to pull over. 251 solved that, but it didn't solve everything else. It actually made some more problems. So next up, this is the battery cell. This is the 200C, MSA 200C. The more I own, longer I own the saw, the more I say, this saw becomes awfully handy. I built a whole house with it, well, cabin, whatever. We're living in it, so I guess it's a house. But, the great thing is, you can set this saw down, it's not running. You can pick it up without having to crank it up and go, do whatever you gotta do. It's not, don't compare it to a gas saw, because it's not the same thing. It doesn't have nearly as much chain speed. Torque's pretty decent, but it's not gonna cut as fast as a gas saw. But man, you can run this thing indoors. So the longer I own this saw, the more it moves up in the ranks. I'm gonna have to give it a, it's even better than a detail saw. I'm gonna give this one an 8. All right, so next up, that's kind of covered the saws. There's a bunch more saws that I've got, but they're all kind of mimicking those setups that I just showed you. The next absolutely essential tool is an angle grinder of some sort. Now, they do make these bigger, bulkier. I don't like them. You want something that's pretty nimble. This is a Makita, I don't know, I've had this one for a long time. I've had a couple of DeWalts and they all had the same problem. I think I've had 3 of these. At some point in its life, and the first one lasted about 3 years, the second one lasted about 6 months, and the last one lasted even shorter than that. So I was not real happy to blow up a tool after just a few months. The fins that are supposed to draw air through the thing, I don't know whether sawdust builds up on them or what the deal is. I try to keep them somewhat clean, but they explode pretty violently. So here you are grinding away, and all of a sudden the entire angle grinder goes kaboom. Not fun. So I haven't had that problem with the Makitas. What was the other? I had a Bosch that I really, really loved, but it got stolen. So it is what it is. All right, so why don't I run a guard? I'm sure there's people going, oh my gosh, this is a recipe for disaster. Well, I've been carving 18 years, and I've yet to cut my fingers off. One time, early on, I was carving for about 1.5 years. I did have it slip on me, and I was wearing a glove because it was cold out, and it went right across my thumb, and I thought I hacked my thumb off. Took the glove off, and it left like the white line that hurt, but it didn't actually cut me. So, if you want to run a guard, run a guard. I'm doing what works for me. I've been doing this a long time. I've got some experience under my belt. This thing could still hurt me, so I treat it with respect. One thing you absolutely want to avoid, they make these discs that have chainsaw teeth on it, or mimic, built-in chainsaw teeth. The ones with the actual chainsaw teeth, and to a lesser degree, the ones that mimic the chainsaw teeth, these things are deadly. I have seen so many pictures of carvers that have gotten absolutely mangled by these things, especially without a guard. There's some guy with a YouTube video out there, and he picks up this big, gigantic angle grinder. Now he's made like 2 cuts on this piece, and this is where he's going to pick up to finish off the carving. Dear Lord, no guards, no gloves, no eye protection, and it's like, dude, I don't really care if you do that in your shop. Don't tell people this is how it's done. I'm telling you, this is dangerous. If it gets wrapped up in your clothes or something, yeah, you know how. It'll walk right all over you. It's not like a chainsaw where if you let go of the throttle, it turns off. This thing's locked on, right? So some of them have a dead man switch where if you let go of it, it'll turn itself off, but they tend to be really awkward to turn on. So, all right, so what have I done for the grinding part of it? You know, I do a lot of grinding on these carvings after they're carved. So you're seeing in the background chainsaw only, right? I haven't hit them with a grinder yet. So I'll burn them, then I'll grind them. What I've done is just take a good old 4.5 inch metal disc, you know, a fairly heavy, thick metal disc, like it's about 1/4 inch thick. And I've actually worn that down some, working on cars and that sort of thing. And when they get just about there, I keep them. I hold that one aside because I want that for this. Now it's got a little bit of a rolled edge. And then I take a 36 grit, just 5 inch disc, or 4.5 if you can't find it, and put that kind of the two just sandwiched together. So I'll take this apart real quick and show you. This tends to be a really cheap setup. Like these discs only cost maybe $1.50. This thing's like, you know, $2 or something like that. I mean, I've seen a lot of people use the plastic backers, but it's kind of like, why? I mean, if I need this, it's right there. All I got to do is take this off and use this disc. And if it gets too worn down, I throw another one on. I mean, not a big deal. But anyway, I've got two tools in one. Not only that, but okay, so you see how it's slightly radiused, right? When you're in the wood, it's radiusing just a little bit. But a little bit that's hanging out there gives you this. Well, if it was square, what you wind up doing is wearing the very edge of the disc out so quickly because you're just like, not only that, it like leaves U shapes in the wood, right? That's no fun. And it'll leave all kinds of grinder marks behind. This is pretty cool because you can actually take that 36 grit disc and make it act like 80 by stroking it like that, you know? So angle grinder, get a good one. Don't get the Harbor Freight one. Don't get the Walmart one. Don't get the, you know, just get yourself a good one the first time around. Make sure it's got a 7/8 arbor, not the small one, because then you'll never find discs for it. And Lowe's or Home Depot sell some pretty decent 36 grit discs for not a ton of money. You can find them elsewhere as well. Now, another one you'll see is the layer disc, right? It kind of looks like shingles applied around this, right? And they are pitched just a little bit, right? So this way it does give you that flat kind of stroke. Problem is, they're expensive, they wear out quick. There's all kinds of cheap knockoffs out there, like the Harbor Freight ones, that if they get damp, they can actually explode. Boom, little particles everywhere. It's not fun. I've had a couple do it. Had some layer discs over the years. You know, they're not too bad. If that's all you can find, keep it dry and use it. But I find it's much more expensive way to go. I'd much rather just run the discs. So, angle grinder, I mean, 9.5. Yeah, pretty important. All right, next up, bark peeler. Now I made this out of a trailer spring. I don't know that you can find one. Harbor Freight used to have a tool that you could adapt and make into one. I haven't seen it for years, but I don't know. The other one you'll see is it has a long wooden handle and a fairly large flat area down here. They work pretty good because then you can like work the bark that way. This one's smaller, it fits in my toolbox. It's pretty comfortable, it gets the job done. So the trick is that I run a streak down the log first, you know, if it's standing upright, and then I start working it around. So that's why it's cut at that angle, and it has a little bit of a whoop at the end. So you need a bark peeler of some sort. Good files, that's the next one. So we got, this is a Save Edge. Excellent file. Steel files tend to be not very aggressive. Really don't like them. In a pinch I'll use one, but they might make it a little bit sharper, but man, you got to sit there and work at it. You know, and sharpening saws with a really fine file. If you slip on that thing, you can cut yourself pretty good. I've done it a few times. I like the Save Edge because it really grabs. I mean, it's a very aggressive file. This is a 5/32. Yeah, 5/32 file, which is what I use on almost all the saws. Okay, torch. Yep, don't want to lose that. I'm good at losing those. Torch. Yeah, you absolutely need a bigger torch. You're in a chainsaw carve, man, do not screw around with one of these little, you know, pipe heater torches. They take forever. You might have one in your toolbox, so I'll just cover that. You know, you might want to like do like the muzzle around a bear just to transition that, just a little burn here or there. or to do lettering or something like that. So maybe a 4 or 5 as far as ranking, something like that. But the big torch, this thing's just about essential. I mean, I'm gonna give it like an 8 because yeah, I can do the carving. Making it sale worthy without a torch is tough. You got to get some color to it. You got to get that wood dried out so you can finish it. This is a Harbor Freight torch. It costs under $40. This is one of their better products. I know I kind of knock them a little bit, but it is what it is. Up your quality, then I'll stop knocking you. Okay, so I also sell like the longer ones at like Lowe's or Home Depot, like 50, 60 bucks. They're terrible. They won't idle. So let me show you about what I mean about idling. So if you're not squeezing the trigger, it should sit there and do this. Now this is adjustable. You can enrich the or you can bring it back, okay? It doesn't turn off if you set it down. It just does what it's saying. So you can burn the carving and then stop for a minute without, having to keep your finger on the trigger to keep it going. That's really decent. The other thing is, it really burns well. So a torch, a pretty good sized propane tank. All right, let's see, router. I don't have one to show you, but everybody knows what a router is. No, I'm not talking about America Online back in the 90s. I'm talking about the one for wood with a little blade on the bottom and you push it through. If you're doing a lot of signs and that sort of thing, yeah, they can be fairly useful. I've got one, I've got a good one. I probably have put 10 hours on it in the last 5 years. So I'm gonna give it like a 2. Like, I really don't use it that much. Dremel tool. Nah, I don't know why, but everybody that starts chainsaw carving, they think, I'm gonna get a Dremel tool. I'm gonna do some fine details with this thing. Well, first off, they don't last long. If you're really working that tool, if you get a month out of it, you're doing something right. They're so garbagey and they're so expensive for what you get, right? So here, if you think you want to play around with a Dremel tool, go to Harbor Freight, get the cheap version, right? Honestly, they last longer than the Dremel tool does, and they're like a third of the cost, half the cost, something like that. Now, there's a couple things with this. The bits that you get, like the little sandpaper drum wheel, these things get damp once, they're done. They just blow up. They don't last 10 minutes as far as detailing. Like, what kind of bits can you find? I used to be able to find, and maybe you still can, little router bits they were actually produced by Dremel. And you could find them in Walmart or whatever, and you can actually do some stuff with those. But like, I don't know, you're not doing that much. Well, I really struggle to find a use for a tool that takes out that little that little bit of wood at a time. I'd much rather have something that really hogs it out. Okay, so don't go with the Dremel, go with the Harbor Freight. That's my advice. I mean, maybe you got a good Dremel, maybe they've improved their quality, whatever. But yeah, the other, if you think you like that, you could actually skip the Dremel thing and go with the actual professional rotary tool. It's just like a Dremel, it's just bigger, right? Like for setting eyes and things like that. Yeah, I see some carvers working those things pretty good, and they'll even get a couple of them and have that way they don't have to change bits. It's not my thing. I don't get into that. I'm gonna say the Dremel, I'm gonna give like a 1. Like, I so rarely use it. For other purposes they can be great. For working on the car, you got those little cut-off wheels. Man, those things can come in darn handy. But for carving, not that much. Not that much. I know it's supposed to be like a great wood carving tool, but not for me. Not for me. All right, so let's move right on. I'm trying to think of a couple other things. Covered a lot of bases here today. Generator, that was the other one. So yeah, you're almost going to need, if you're doing to do this professionally, or even go out and work in the backyard, having a little generator can be so handy. I'm not talking about a big guy. You don't want a big generator. You want something that you can pick up and walk off with. So I know Harbor Freight carries a Predator line. I don't know that much about them. I had pretty good luck with a couple of their other motors, so maybe they're decent. And they're not that much money. But the Honda is well worth the money. well worth it. Like, you'll buy it, you're gonna buy it once. Keep the oil change, that thing will run forever. The only problem I've had with them is they don't like it when it's super bitter cold out. Like around 15 degrees, they don't want to start, or if they do start, though, I don't know whether it's icing up in the lines or whatever. I've heard ice fishermen actually wrap the generator in a blanket, which sounds like a recipe for a fire, but whatever. I mean, maybe it works. But yeah, I mean, these things, I've got a 1,000 watt, I got a 2,000 watt. I'd say for most of the carving stuff, 1,000 watts fine. But, you know, maybe you get to a show and you want to run the air conditioner. Maybe you want to step up to the 2000. It's not that much more money. It's only a little bit bigger. It's a little bit heavier. But you're going to have to make up your mind on how much wattage you're going to use. But a 1,000 watt will run a router, all your battery chargers, you know, grinder all day long, no complaints. You're not gonna work that thing. 2,000 even run a little MIG welder, like a 110 MIG welder, which you don't use for carving that often, but maybe you can incorporating some metal work. All right, so the last thing. Now, I will say Walmart just started carrying these. Please don't get one. Just go with the American-made one. These guys invented it, they patented it, and now, I don't know, the Chinese are involved. I'd rather keep my money here. So this is a no-spill brand gas can. It is the handiest gas can that I've ever used, and I hate these new gas cans. Like, oh, they're terrible. I could do a whole video on how much I hate the new gas cans. Those stupid. This thing's great. You just push the little button there, it puts gas out. You tend not to spill nearly as much. Like, this is a good gas can. I've even bought a couple of them because for 5 gallons, you know, at one show, it's like a competition, like a 9-hour competition plus quick carves, I'll go through 1.5 of these. It's a 2.5 gallon container. That's a lot of gas, so I have to keep a 5 gallon in reserve so that I can mix, you know, mid-show and keep trucking. I think that about covers it. I'm sure I missed a few. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Thank you for watching the video, and have a nice day.